Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's Tech Voices, I'm joined by a very special guest. With me is Greg Nelson, Chief Executive Officer of cybersecurity company RSA. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thank you, James, for the invitation. Look forward to the conversation.
Definitely. I want to talk about some of the core trends in security these days, passwordless security, the role of AI in security. But first, I know you've got a new job as CEO. I know you're not new to RSA, the company, but you became CEO in September, right? Relatively recently. First of all, nice going on the job.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for that, James. No, and it's pretty exciting. This is my 90th day as CEO today on the
Wow.
dot. So you can't time it better from an interview perspective. But no, it's been a great ride. I've been with the company 4+ years,
Right.
but recently took over as CEO. 90 days on the dot, and
Hmm.
we're excited about where we're heading, what we're doing.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess that's what I'm curious about. I mean, obviously, RSA has a long legacy in security, major cybersecurity vendor. What's a shift you want RSA to make under your leadership, and why is now the time for that shift?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, James. And look, this next chapter of RSA, and we have a storied history. We pioneered the market, a 40+ year, tremendous brand. But what I'd say this next period of growth for RSA, what I call this next chapter of growth, will be defined by kind of four key topics.
Hmm.
One is just passwordless, which I know you asked me to speak about today, and we'll go further about, throughout the
Right.
conversation today.
Yep.
But there's three other drivers that we're hyper focused is creating AI solutions, specifically to help, that identity threat vector,
Hmm.
the whole identity security posture management opportunity. And then the final piece is one that I have a lot of passion about too, is just that high assurance vertical, because RSA has always protected the most secure, and we want to continue to innovate and help those organizations evolve in this new threat landscape.
Hmm. It makes perfect sense. I mean, certainly that AI piece, it's obviously it's where everything is going these days, so it makes perfect sense to be focusing on that. Well, I guess that there's the issue of identity and security and identity authentication. I think a lot of executives say identity is the new parameter, yet budgets still skew towards good old-fashioned traditional network security. How do you advise customers to rebalance on this issue?
Yeah, no, I mean, James, it's a great question, right? And it's one, talking to customers over the last 4 years and really in the last 90 days, even accelerated to try to better understand that perspective. And the way I've always liked to explain it is, right, is that from a CISO perspective, they typically have built higher walls and they've looked, to have those wider moats and the castle, like if you look at it today, it doesn't exist like it used to in the past, right? Data now lives outside the castle. It's in the
Right.
cloud, it's on the mobile phone. And
It's
what I
everywhere.
always say now to CISOs is you have to think differently and really kind of like look at how you align your spin today, really about where that threat vector sits for your current organization. And what you're seeing is a very different trend pattern, with the CISOs. And there's three trends, James, that I think that are driving kind of this budget conversation and really the advice that I give. And we had the IDIQ report come out in October of this year, which is we survey over 2,000 CIOs and CISOs globally
Hmm.
about really what's on their mind, which I think
Okay.
really relates back to the budget question. And number one is 69% of organizations in the last 3 years have been breached. That's a
Ah,
27%
wow.
increase. So
Okay.
CISOs are being asked, saying, how do I need to think differently? Where do I need to evolve? The second one, which you're not going to be surprised about, is really that 90% are looking to go to passwordless, but they're struggling. It's hard. Consumer passwordless exists, but workforce passwordless has been hard. And then the third one's really AI. I think from a budget perspective, it relates back to that, and if you look at it, 91% of the companies we surveyed are going to be implementing some type of AI solution this coming year. So
Mhm.
you use that kind of as an umbrella on where we're at today. I've kind of got three areas that I speak to, specifically to the CIOs, directly about. And number one would be, just follow the attacker, not the architecture itself. And if you look at major breaches in the last 2 3 years, it's the MGMs and the Marks and Spencer. It's really
Right.
that they haven't smashed through the firewall, right? You've had a compromised credential, compromised identity, that created that instance. And it's it's a great saying that we've said internally, right? Is that attackers don't break in, they log in, right?
Mm,
And when you
hmm
think of that as a concept, James, is from a CISO perspective, it's like I have to move and modernize my structure and change that budget structure around passwordless. It's around better identity security to modernize that tech stack to meet the attackers where they're trying to attack these organizations globally. And so that's my number one advice that I would give.
hmm
Number two, it's really, it's really breaking down those silos. There's too much, if you have silos, you have more work. And I think in security, it's about focus, from that perspective. And I think what Passwordless brings to that perspective, when I speak to emerging CISOs, it's every user, every use case.
Hmm.
And that's easier said than done, right? I'd say 80% of the enterprises that I speak to, they have Microsoft and Mac. They have cloud and legacy. And
Right.
what I say to them, when giving advice is that you have to find a vendors and partners. You can't pick boutique solutions to solve Windows and then go pick another boutique solutions to solve Mac and X and Y.
Sure.
What you need to do is find, vendors that can consolidate that spend, which is I think that 90% statistic that I brought up front on the passwordless side. That's really the driver of why people are frustrated because there's just too many disparate solutions that are out there.
hmm
And then the third piece on budget, James, that I think we all agree with this, but it's one that you have to think differently about is that you have to frame security more as a business enabler, right? And how are you driving and reducing that friction? Because organizations above, typically, boards and leadership teams think of security that it's going to create more friction. It's going to it's more that VPN. It's that legacy kind of use case views that more security is going to make it harder and it's going to create more friction in the company.
Right.
But when it's done right, and that's what I have passion about, I think the industry we have passion about, right? Frictionless, improves user experience. Frictionless, brings a better help desk experience. Frictionless is how you better work. Passwordless brings that third party consolidation apart. So what I always say is that, the best way to frame it kind of in closing here, James, on the topic, right, is if you say secure the network, right, that's a cost center, kind of connotation that, that people got to go legacy, kind of legacy funding out. When you say streamline access and reduce friction, that's about efficiency. And I think this next wave of modernization from an identity perspective, through passwordless and the modernization of legacy applications, will bring that efficiency back to organizations, which I think will be the spirit of AI and some of the innovations we'll talk about today.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think it's interesting. Yeah, the idea of passwordless. It's worth drilling down to that a little bit more. It's certainly becoming an industry goal, but adoption's been slower than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be picked up far faster. So, what's the missing piece here between vision and reality, and how does RSA intend to close that gap?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, James. And what I've seen is in the last 12 months, you've seen an acceleration. And I think there's two things that have happened is that I think consumer passwordless happened first, right? When you watch market trends, always happen in security. A lot of times they happen at home, and then people say, I want to bring that security experience back into the workforce because that's how I'm working with my applications, when I'm not at work specifically. So there's two things that have really happened, that I would say that are driving it. The missing piece. I guess let's start with the missing piece, then I'll talk about what we need to do about it. Because the
Sure.
question was more about that, James, is that the
hmm
missing piece to me is end-to-end workforce passwordless. It's back to that statistic that 90% of the organizations are failing today.
hmm
There's too many boutique solutions. What they're looking for is it has, we talked about it, a few minutes ago. It's Windows and Mac. It's cloud and hybrid. And I think that's been the missing piece is that if you can only secure the login, specifically and think of it as less as that login moment. Clients always say, if I solve the login, I've gone passwordless. Well, if 30-40% of your other applications after login still require your password, it creates that frustration as like, why did I even go forward in the first place? So
hmm
when you bring end-to-end workforce passwordless, you're going to solve it on the login, but you're going to solve it on the other apps as you go down the stack. And I think from a technology perspective, RSA is taking a thought leadership position and working with clients to drive that, more than just a login experience, not celebrate the login moment. Let's bring that end-to-end workforce password. And how you close the gap, I think it's three things, James, that I've been thinking about. One is innovation. I think two is education, and then three is what I would say is really how you look at rollouts. And let's talk about innovation because I think
Hmm.
innovation is a key part of that. And James, you've talked to us, in the past, and we talked about Help Desk Live Verify. That's a great example of innovation that's had a lot of, Fortune 500 companies come to us and say, how do you help us bring a passwordless, different help desk experience that can bring that bi-directional password experience to help, thwart, the MGM, Marks and Spencer's type attack. So sometimes innovation drives company to go, make that move to close the gap. We have unique technology at RSA
Hmm.
for helping secure help desk that drives a passwordless initiative. I think the second one's education. I think that, and I would say education and awareness. I was thinking about this in advance of the interview today, is that there's still a perception that it's hard, and we need to do a better job as an industry showing how to make workforce passwordless become easy. And I think part of that's user experience, part of that standards, and I think there's been a lot of breakthrough moments over the last 6, 12 months to get there. So a lot of times when I speak with organizations, they don't realize we have the capabilities that we have or that workforce passwordless has matured to the level that it has, which is really driving it forward. And then the final piece I would say is rollout.
Hmm.
And what I would say is like, it is not a big bang. Passwordless starts, you need to start with your highest risk users and say, let's start with 20% of the population, go to 30, go to 40, and do it in a phased rollout approach. And what I would say is what I have seen not work with some of our clients is like it's the big bang approach. Let's do it, structured over time,
Hmm.
over the next, 6, 18, months, and make it, very methodical of how you knock down that passwordless use case, overall for companies.
Hmm. Of those three, it feels like education might be the most lacking. I'm not sure, and that I think sometimes businesses still don't get it. Like, what? We're going to give up passwords? I mean, tell us why. I mean, that seems like it's a real laggard in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I was at the Gartner conference last week, right? And I was meeting with CISOs from a variety of different industries. And I think there's just a misperception about where it's at, how you can accelerate. And I think it's not just RSA, it's the industry, that really needs to lead that charge. And I believe it's here. We've seen tremendous momentum over the last 6 months. I think, you're asking me up front, like, where do you see, like, what's the big wave that's going to drive this next chapter of growth for RSA? That will be passwordless. You're going to have all organizations over the next 3 to 5 years will be on, will have an implemented passwordless journey. So I think when the dam breaks and it goes forward, it's going to be an accelerated path. But I do agree, awareness and capabilities and maturity will be key drivers of making that come together.
Hmm. Well, let's talk about AI. It feels like it's the only thing people are talking about these days.
Yeah.
How is RSA embedding AI, especially agentic AI, into
Yep.
authentication and things like risk analytics without creating new attack surfaces? That's the thing. Like sometimes the AI agents can
Yep.
be a new attack surface even.
No, it's a great question, and what we're doing is doing it very thoughtfully. We're looking to what I would say harness AI to really make sure that we're not introducing a new threat vector, but how do you drive productivity? And you know our clients are asking us to lead here. I think, James, you speak to a lot of different companies. Everybody's talking AI, and 91% of clients are trying to implement it. But
Sure.
you need to do it the right way. You got to do it the most secure way and make sure you're protecting the data and the identities as you go forward to that. And when you look at our history, we always, we've had a product called Risk AI, which, started about 20 plus years ago. It was probably one of the first. It's a machine learning algorithm, but it really assesses risk, and automates response. And that foundation's really helped evolve our strategy around AI over the last 20 plus years as we go. And what we really see as a great opportunity here, James, is because we've got a unified platform across identity, governance, life cycle, and even the risk AI core data. And we know now how to best use that kind of in a harness it correctly to use it in a safe way with our clients. So what I'd say is the exciting part for this next chapter, James, is that there's two types of AI agents that we're looking to create, and
Hmm.
and we just announced one of them is there's an RSA Advisor series, and if you think of RSA Advisor, it's really how do you surface information for humans to take action, right? Like it's not your agentic AI, but how do you use AI to surface data up to help take action? And I'll talk about a great example of this in partnership that we've done with Microsoft.
Hmm.
But let me go to the second one, and I'll go back, to what
Okay.
we're doing with Microsoft. Is then there's the RSA agent, which is what you're asking us to, talk about, which is really how
Right.
do you surface risk for agents, to take action and where you evolve. And what we announced at Microsoft Ignite, which was 3 weeks ago, was really in partnership with Microsoft. They're announcing their own agent advisor, type marketplace, and we're one of the original sponsors to that. Is we launched an RSA advisor for admin threats.
Uh-huh.
Because if you look at the threat vector sector, you've always got to make sure your site admin hasn't been compromised, is secure, because that is the most common area that threat vectors attack. So it's a great example where we've been able to use our AI type technology in partnership with Microsoft and Copilot, and converge our offerings together to bring kind of a unified security security growth vector together. That's just one example of an AI agent that we just launched in the last 3 weeks. I think if you look toward the coming year, we think compliance, a lot of our high assurance clients have very unique compliance and regulatory requirements that we can also use AI to really take away some of those, automate some of the tasks that can make your door compliance or whatever compliance regulatory environment that you're in. We
Mhm.
can use AI to really increase that posture, right? It kind of goes back to identity security posture management. AI and posture management will collide together a lot with a lot of innovation that's coming down the pipe for RSA.
Mhm. Well, just to clarify on the AI agent, so is one of those two types of agents something that maybe a security professional would use in the security operations center, they go hand in hand with that individual, or it's not that kind of a thing necessarily?
No, I think our agents as developed today, like let's use the RSA, advisor for admin threats that we,
Right.
did in partnership with Microsoft.
Uh-huh.
That's much more, not used in SOC, more probably used by, the IAM lead who's just making sure you have the right security posture across the organization. It would still, bleed out to the SOC, in those perspective, but we're really trying to use tools that directly, the individuals that are using our clients to drive a more effective, experience. I think, James, the one thing that I always look at AI and how we're looking at AI is that there's still a hiring need, out there, right? Is that, there's for all the security jobs, there's only about 86% qualified individuals,
Right.
globally
Yep.
to find those jobs. So like from a RSA perspective, the way we look at AI is like, how do we create the right agents, advisor agents to help fill those gaps so our teams can have, a better threat posture for where they can accelerate forward because there's never enough resources. It's how do we get people to focus on the right things, the right threat vectors to it, and how do we use that in a very, kind of harness controlled environment, for our high assurance clients that are out there.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's look to the future. I'd love to get your sense of the
Yeah.
future of cybersecurity, where we're going. I mean, that is more specifically, is there a big fear about where we're going, perhaps, or not? And what gives you optimism on the other side of the question?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think James, like, look, I think well, I'll answer the question. It's a fear and optimism both in the same way. I think
Mm,
what we're seeing is a very accelerated, evolution, from deep fakes to voice clones to now like what you would call as this agentic kind of an adversarial AI component where the social reengineering, it is moving at a speed that I think all of us, every 3 to 4 months it accelerates to something that we couldn't, probably even imagine or just accelerate at a pace
right.
that's at a different type of force multiplier magnitude.
It's amazing.
But but what gives me pause and excitement because that's our challenge as an industry. That's what RSA we're here to do to protect. We secure the most secure. We have 40 years of heritage of doing that. But the optimism I have in this is that I feel like the technology has caught up, right? The
Mm,
best way to protect yourself against that type of threat vector that exists out there today is passwordless and phishing resistant tokens. And that will give you the data, the AI, the capabilities that you need to really, you know, from an AI perspective, it's really about how do you stop the attack in the right at the earliest process of the kill chain, right? And what we really have from a industry perspective, I would say, James, is that our technology is here, right? It is now caught up. Passwordless workforce is real. The whole phishing resistant opportunity is real. It's now up to us to work with our clients in the industry to bring that right threat vector, that right approach to CISOs to best stay ahead of that threat vector that exists.
Mhm.
But either way, I'm very optimistic about the industry. I'm very optimistic. Being at both Microsoft and Gartner, we were both at those conferences over the last 30 days. There's a sense of energy
Mhm.
around these topics that I think the next 2, 3 years will be a very innovative time, not just for RSA, but just the industry as a whole.
Mhm.
And that's what gives me excitement, is that we have the solution to best innovate, but we can never be satisfied. We always got to keep innovating. This next chapter of RSA will be innovation led, James, and we speak again in 6, 12 months. We're going to have continuous innovation to continue to fight those threat vectors that sit in front of us. And that's the passion that I've got, the passion that the team here at RSA has. And that's how we aggressively go about it, from an industry perspective.
That sounds great. I mean, certainly innovation will be called for it. As the hackers get ever smarter, we've got the good guys have got to get ever smarter too. No doubt about it. Greg, I think you said it. A lot of good stuff, and I hope we can speak again sometime. Thank you very much.
No, James, thank you for the time, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you, James.